Hello, ladies and gentlemen of EL 121. This is Miss Latifa, and today we're going to be reviewing Unit 2. So this is your first webinar and actually my 7th trial run. So hopefully I get it right this time. So Unit 2 is basically researching your bibliography, critical thinking, critical reading, and critical writing. At any time, you can pause or play this program at your convenience. And if you have any questions whatsoever, or if there's anything that you do not understand, please feel free to come to my office. And if my office hours are inconvenient to you, simply email me on the LMS. But please try to make your questions as clear as possible, as I am having difficulty understanding some questions that are being emailed my way. Alright, let's get started then. First of all, you need to make sure that you have the second book, which is an introduction to essay writing. This has nothing to do with short stories. This is the second book we're looking at. And once you're ready, turn the book to page 15, please. So this unit is simply comprised of 8 sections. I've divided the presentation to bulk up 4. So it's comprised of 4 sections. So we're looking at first one, which is the introduction to the unit. Very simple. We're looking at the bibliography, critical reading, thinking, and writing, note-taking and annotating, which is quite brief, and then look at the 3 after that. It's writing a summary, writing a critique, and writing a synthesis. Now these are very, very shallow, or I wouldn't say shallow, but very simplistic notes regarding them. So regarding these 3 points. So I've bulked them up all together. And then the 8th, which is rounding up. Again, as with every single unit that we've been through, rounding up is very important, simply because you have the definition of every term and concept in this unit and in every other unit. If there is a term that you do not understand or a term that I do not define in this presentation, please go back to rounding up. And I hope I don't have to tell you this, but please read the unit on your own. That said, let's get started then. Alright, so the first part is researching your bibliography. Now for those that have never had to turn in an academic work, or have never actually done a piece of research, or have done a piece of research but simply do not know what a bibliography is, it simply is a list of sources, articles, books, websites that you use in the writing of an academic work. Now, if you remember, I asked for a homework, but it wasn't graded. It was simply a work cited, and I wanted to see your level of expertise when it came to bibliography, just so I can understand how to assess and how to approach this topic. Alright, so why should you write a bibliography? And why is a bibliography important? First of all, you need to give credit to the authors and sources that you used. So if you write something, I'd assume this is your own writing and I'd assume it's your own ideas. But a lot of the time, maybe you find something on the internet. Maybe you read an article in the newspaper and then you decide to copy it. Well, if you decide to copy it and you don't source it and you don't give credit to the author or to the source, that's very problematic. That would create a problem, everyone. But we'll go to plagiarism in a bit. So again, why should you write a bibliography? You must give credit to the authors and sources you use. A good list of sources demonstrates that you have undertaken wide-ranging research. So simply when I ask you, research this topic, you don't only go to Wikipedia and just give me everything you have there. No. It shows me that you've actually been to several locations, maybe the library, maybe you looked at different books, maybe you read the newspaper regarding the source. Referencing your work allows the reader to look at the materials you used. So a lot of time when I'm doing research, I look at what the writer has referenced and then I go back to that reference. So it's very important to reference the work. And the most important, and unfortunately it is, why you should write a bibliography, it's to avoid plagiarism. Plagiarism is when you, by mistake or not by mistake, or consciously or unconsciously, use someone else's work and you do not give credit to them, or you take something from a newspaper and you do not give credit to the newspaper or to the writer. Now, this is a form of academic theft. And in any case, in the TMA or in the final or in whenever, when you have to write an essay, and I realize that there is some plagiarism going on, this constitutes a 0. No questions asked whatsoever. So please make sure whenever you are writing something up, please give credit to the authors and sources. All right, so let's look at the sources specifically. So there are two types or two main kinds of collecting sources. You have something called a print source, and then you have another thing called an electronic source. Now, the print is something that you can touch or you can hold. That's the simplest way to remember it. So it's information printed or published, like books, like newspaper articles, like magazines. And then you have what is called an electronic source. An electronic source is basically boomed with the rise of the internet. So it's information that you can access, but it's online or electronic. So you have electronic versions of books or online only journals, such and so forth. So let's take a look at the types of informations you have. This is from the Virginia Tech University. So there are many different types of sources. So a magazine, for example, National Geographic, would be a print source. It's a magazine has a collection of articles that you can actually hold and flip through. An academic journal, if you can touch it and you can hold it and you can flip through it, is also a print source. A newspaper, again, any type of newspaper you read that you can hold is a print source. Books are print sources. Encyclopedias are print sources. So any website, anything online is not a print source. It's actually an electronic source. Another form of electronic sources is, for example, any online magazine. So one magazine online I frequently look at is Jadaliya. Basically has very interesting articles. Another one I look at is Electronic Intifada. And it has a lot of interesting articles as well. So as long as it is academic, and I'll explain that in a bit, you can use these types of articles in your sources, in collecting sources. Okay, that said, let's move on. So, assessing materials and evaluating sources. Simply, when you find your website, or when you find your books, or when you find your electronic journal like Jadaliya, how do you know if this material is useful? Simply, how do you evaluate it? Is it good? Is it a good source? And I hate using the word good, but it's appropriate. Or is it not such a good source for your specific topic that you are researching? So before we get started, why evaluate sources? Why is it important to choose good sources? Well, simply because you need to provide an accurate and credible base for academic work. And of course, when the type of sources you use and the quality of the sources you use basically contributes to the overall quality and depth of your research in a particular field. So if I give you a research topic, or if you're researching a research topic, and you give me sources from Wikipedia, I would have a problem with that. Or if you give me a source from a Google dot something, or from an online magazine that is not credible, I would have a problem with that as well. As opposed to, say, an article where you go to a journal article like Gister and get material there. But we'll go through that in a bit. So what types of sources can be used in academic writing? Now, keep in mind, if you are doing your own research, and this is for your own interests, I don't care what type of resources you use or what type of sources you use. You can use Wikipedia, you can use whatever you want. But in terms of academic writing, And remember what academic is? We've went through this at the very first unit, academic versus non-academic. Okay. So in academic writing, what type of sources can be used? You can use books. You can use newspapers, but please keep in mind, with newspapers, do not use opinion pieces. Opinion pieces meaning what that writer's opinion is. Does he agree? Does he not agree? So on and so forth. You can use government documents if you want factual information. You can use specific websites, not every website. You can use articles from journals and other publications, and multimedia. Multimedia meaning specific pictures, music, print, art. All right, take a look at that big X here. I'm telling you now, please do not use Wikipedia. Why do we not like Wikipedia in academic writing? So in Wikipedia, what you or anyone else can do is edit the information. So simply, I can go to Wikipedia now, and I can click on edit, and I can edit the information that's in the article itself. So Wikipedia as a source is not very scholarly. For that reason, in all honesty, it's not simply in my class, it's in every academic field. Wikipedia is not a legitimate source, and it's not an academic source. So I hope I make myself very clear. Alright, so simply a quick warning. Now, once you have the sources, so you research and you have the sources, you have the articles, and that's great. But you have to look at each article individually, because sometimes when you read, you would print it out and then you read it and then you think, you know what? No, this is not really useful to me. Alright, so you need to look at every single article and evaluate it individually. Okay, so questions to ask yourself when evaluating sources. Is the information current? So if the information is, say, from 1952 or 1964 or even from the 1980s when it comes to science or history, if the information is not current, you need to rethink the source itself. Who is the author of the material? Now, this is very important, guys, because what usually happens is when you have studies, say, for example, a health study or a health claim like for weight loss, or if they say this new pill is the new miracle worker, you need to understand that you need to look at the authors. And why is this important? Because a lot of times the authors are biased towards the material. Biased means they hold a specific viewpoint, and in these cases, a lot of authors, unfortunately, in articles, these articles are sponsored, meaning that a specific company gives that specific author or that specific writer of that article money to write about this paper or to write about this topic itself. And it's usually to the favor of those giving them the writer money. So always ask, who is the author? And what are their qualifications? So if you have someone writing about a scientific discovery, but that person is not a scientist, you have to question their qualifications. Now about the information. Is it accurate, or does it at least seem accurate? Is it well researched? Is it impartial, meaning is there bias or is there no bias? Does it seem reasonable? Does it fit with articles found in your research? And is the information relevant to your own topic? And is it worth citing? So sometimes you do find articles, but then you realize the articles aren't really that useful to your own specific research topic. And in that case, it's not really that important to use that specific source. So, scholarly journals. Now, usually I prefer scholarly journals when I research, so I thought I'd help you out with this little tip. So, scholarly journals are usually lengthy articles. Now, I say usually because some of them can even be 2-3 pages long and can be just as scholarly. So, length isn't really that important, but it is written by academics. And in that case, when it is written by academics, there are many references and citations given. Now, a tip, a scholarly journal does not contain ads. So it usually does not give you an ad for Coca-Cola or Pepsi. And it's usually charts and graphs, not photos. And it's geared, meaning whoever is writing this paper or this specific paper that is being written is written towards a specific field, and it's written towards the experts and the scholars of that specific field. Now take a look. So what I usually do is when I want to research is, say I'm at Google, right? So I simply type Google Scholar. This is my go-to when I need to research something. So let's go on the theme of Edward Said and Orientalism, all right? So Edward Said is the writer of that book. So let's say Orientalism, and let's say, all right, East, West. All right. So what happens, what Google Scholar is, it does all the work for you. You no longer have to specify, is this a scholarly work or not? Is this an academic work or not? Google Scholar is for the academics. For every academic work, it's simply here. So take a look. So it gives you the first book, and it gives you citations, and these are articles. Take a look. This is Gister. This is the one I was telling you about. Citation, Orientalism and Middle East Feminist Studies. And again, it's an article because it's Gister. And then it gives you links to these articles. Take a look over here. It's PDF files. Now, some of them are PDF files, which is excellent for you. Some of them, like the ones, like the book over here, you actually need to look at. And then you can customize the range. Take a look. Remember when I was telling you that is it current? You could say since 2010. So these are the books or the articles that have been published after 2010. And look, take a look. So reading Orientalism, Said and Unsaid. So this is a book again. Citations. And then over here, when I'm talking about academic journals, these are the journals of ethnic and migration studies. So everything that contains the word journal is usually one that you can access. And at times, again, you can just click here and click the links. So I highly recommend Google Scholar. It's very, very useful. And then you can link your citations and include your own library. For every research that I do, I've been using this for pretty much quite a bit. And it's been very useful to me. So I hope you take this and really keep it in mind for every piece of writing from now on. Okay, so moving on then. So again, within research, within sources, you have something called a primary source, and then you have what is called a secondary source. Let's look at primary sources. So primary sources is simply a document or a physical object which was written or created during the event. So simply, let's keep this very real. A primary source is a source which you can, or if you have a diary, or if you have maps, or actual speeches, letters, government documents, okay, interviews, it's heard, autobiographies, and official records. These are all types of primary sources. So they also include, an example of our primary source includes, say, for example, Plato's Republic, Women in Ancient Greece, the first edition of Orientalism by Edward Said. All right? Okay. The secondary source is again a source, but it's not a source about the actual topic. It's a source that interprets the primary topic or the primary source. So for example, going back to Edward Said. So Edward Said's Orientalism is a book, right? So Edward Said Orientalism, the actual book itself, would be a primary source. The secondary source would be a critique of Edward Said's Orientalism, or about gender in Edward Said's Orientalism. Another example is an introduction to essay writing EL 121 short story book. The book itself, the one in your hand, is the primary source. If I decide one day to write a review of the book itself and I publish it, that book itself would be the secondary source because I am interpreting and analyzing that book, the short story or the essay writing book. So they may have pictures, quotes, and graphics of the primary source of the introduction to essay writing, but it doesn't mean it's a primary source. So textbooks, actual like heavy history textbooks that you have in school, like in middle school or in high school, or science textbook, magazine articles, criticisms, commentaries, even encyclopedias. These are usually secondary sources. Okay, moving on then. Okay, so helpful tips. So when you're sourcing, I would recommend you make a note of the sources as you go along because you simply forget or where you found something and then you have to go back and try to find it. And if there's an interesting book cover, take a picture of it. You have your mobile phone, use it. And then you can use your bookmarks to basically use favorites over here. Or if you have any problems, you can simply ask the library or the librarian for further help. Now, in creating sources, remember, so last time I asked you to give me 10 sources, and a few of you were quite unsure about how to create a source. So I'm going to show you something, and it is necessary, everyone, that you actually do know how to source and do know what is necessary in sourcing and in giving references and bibliography. But for your ease, take a look over here. This is EasyBib. EasyBib, let's take a look over here. I've already opened it up for you. Simply generates citations for you. And what's amazing about it is you can simply type a website or write the name of a book or a newspaper article or a journal and click cite and it will cite it for you. So let me go back to Orientalism. All right, so it's a book. I've written the author's name and I've written the title, which is Orientalism. I cite it. I'm sorry, I should go back. Take a look over here before we do anything. I forgot to mention this to you, ladies and gentlemen. So there are different types of citation formats that we use. MLA, APA, Chicago, and then you have several others. Now, at this stage, and I would assume in this class, you do not need to worry about the types of citations that you use. So simply keep it as MLA format. For university and for English literature, humanities, we tend to go more towards MLA, Chicago, and Harvard. But for this class and for English literature classes, I would recommend MLA. Okay, so going back to Edward Said, let's cite it. Let me show you how it works for future references. Alright, so this is Edward Said, Orientalism. So we're going to a book because I'm looking at the specific book. Cite it. It simply does the work for you. It's very simple. Alright, this is the one. It was published in 1979. This I know. So all I have to do is click on this button, cite it, and it's citing it for me. Now this is not a quick fix, ladies and gentlemen. You need to know how to do this. But for simplicity's sake, let's take a look. See? It's Vintage, Publishers, New York, 1979. Now, at times, you don't want to cite the whole book. You want to cite a chapter or a section. But in this case, let's just go with the whole book. And then create the citation below. That's it. That's the citation. Family name, full name, first name, the title of the book, publication, where the place of publication, the date, and take a look. Print. Remember, print and electronic, this is a print source. Alright, so simply copy it, paste it, or take a look. It even creates your own citations. Well, I've done 3, but do you understand? So simply this is a tool you can use. Okay, let's get back to it then. So this is the bibliography. This is the first part of the unit. Let's take a look at the second part of the unit. Critical reading, thinking, and writing. All right. So when we read or when we think and when we write, there is a difference between doing it passively and doing it critically. Let's try to break it down. Let's take a look at critical reading. So simply, it's a process of reading that goes beyond understanding a text, meaning you have to basically consider and evaluate the reading. So when I like to read, or when you enjoy reading and you're just reading for pleasure, all right, that's not what critical reading is. Critical reading is actually reading to really pay attention to the details in the text. So basically what we do in class all the time when we look at the short stories, when you're actually reading the stories but trying to get information out of it, this is critical reading. So you do it without even realizing that you do it. This type of paying attention to details and really thinking about what you're reading, as opposed to simply reading for pleasure's sake, that's called active reading. All right? So what we do in class is actually active reading. And it's important because it results in deep understanding, evaluation of ideas, and it helps you out. It makes you ask questions and answer questions, right? So this part of the unit, the critical reading, thinking, and writing, is simply understanding the critical aspect of it. Oh dear, I apologize. Okay, so there are different strategies. Now, from what I've seen, in all honesty, ladies and gentlemen, it seems that your active reading strategies are great. I mean, and to each his own. At the end of the day, what works for you might not work for someone else. But there are proven strategies that can help you. So you have to ask yourself from the very beginning, and this is usually done in the book for you, usually in the short stories. What is the topic? Ask yourself pre-reading questions, and what do you already know about it? So for example, in the midterm, when you're reading a question, right? Before you read the article itself or the essay or the short story that's given to you, think, what is the question asking? What is it that they specifically want, even before reading? And keep this in mind while you are reading. Now, and this is very important, you need to identify and define any unfamiliar terms. Now, if you don't understand something, a word or something, you won't understand what the question is asking, or you won't understand the sentence itself. So try to at least define the difficult terms or those that you do not understand. And if you're at a situation that you cannot define it, simply try to guess from the sentence itself. Now, bracket the main idea or thesis of the reading. Now, usually, and this is a tip, all right, try to identify the thesis or the main idea in the reading. Again, try to identify it. This is very important because basically the main idea tells you what the whole article or the whole story is about. Now, usually the thesis statement is towards the very beginning, which is at the introduction, or the first opening paragraph. This is usually where you find the thesis. All right? So usually the introduction or the first opening paragraph after the introduction, you will find the thesis. This is for not short articles, not long articles. All right? Now, what I do with active reading is I read a paragraph and then try to think, so what is this specific paragraph about? And I write down 1 or 2 words, what it's about and why is it necessary. Simply that. And so if I need to go back to a specific, if there's a question after that, I don't have to go back to the whole reading. No, I go to these little notes, but we'll look at that at notes and annotation. Okay, so critical thinking. Critical thinking, again, is a technique for evaluating information and ideas. Now, for deciding what to accept and believe. Now, simply when you are reading, right, when you are critically reading an article or a research argument, you have to think and you have to really critically think, not passively, that is this information correct or is this believable? and you have to decide for yourself what to accept and what to reject. Now keep in mind that critical reading and thinking work together, because critical thinking allows us to monitor our understanding as we read. Because sometimes we can read something and we think this is absolutely ridiculous. So this is simply what critical thinking is. We examine the text more closely. So to think critically, simply think read. You recognize the assumptions in the article itself. And then you try to evaluate the arguments for yourself and then draw conclusions. And there are different critical thinking strategies, but simply think of the W's and the H, which is who, what, where, when, why, and how. Who said it? What did they say? Where did they say it? When, why, and how did they say it? All right? And critical writing. All right. So critical writing is when you make sure you've considered all sides of an argument when writing. So when I give you a topic, right, and I say, give me the pros and cons of this argument, all right? Simply writing the pros is not enough. You have to consider all sides of the argument, meaning you have to write the pros and cons. It's a balanced presentation of reasons. And once that's done, you also have to think that it's a clear presentation of your own evidence and argument, leading to your own conclusion. Ladies and gentlemen, what I would like is not to simply summarize everything that's written, right? So, for example, in the story of Jack and the Beanstalk, or if we're writing about to build a fire, all right, and there's a question asked. What is the setting? Or how is Jack's character? What do you think of Jack's character? Or is Jack and the Beanstalk a fairy tale? All right? Tell me, and not only tell me. Don't only copy paste from the book itself. Don't simply memorize it and then write back the answers. No, I want your own analysis as well. I want you to think. And I want you to give your own evidence and arguments, meaning give me examples about it. All right? Okay, so the stages is what I want to look at is you as a writer. I want your idea as well. I want you to give me your own opinion about it. I want you to explain and clarify, meaning give me examples. All right? Okay. So the third part we're looking at is note-taking and annotation. Now, note-taking and annotation are, for some, you can either look at one or the other. They're very similar. But even with note-taking, it requires an effective approach to reading. All right? And it will basically help you with your critical thinking and writing. And it's one or the other, in all honesty. It depends on the person. You have a specific way of note-taking and annotation. I have a specific way of note-taking and annotation. There is not one specific way. So, personally, I reject the idea that there is one specific way and everyone has to abide by it. But let's take a look at it. So, in annotation, a note-taking is simply writing notes, right? There's a huge article and you're simply writing specific notes about it. But an annotation is a note for a comment or explanation. So it's defining that note. And then you always develop your own form of annotation. This is a given. And what do you get out of annotating? It's simply a deeper understanding. Now there are different tools. You can use a highlighter, you can use a pencil, or if you're annotating online, you can use your own text. Now, if you are using a highlighter or your own pencil, please do not use it if the book is not your own book or if it's a book from the library, only because it's not okay. It's not your own property. If you must, use the sticky notes or your own notebook, but don't highlight on books that are not your own. Okay, so simply tips, if you will. These are not set on stone, and you do not have to memorize them or know them, but they're tips that could be useful. So do not write unnecessary or repeated words, right? Only write down important facts, facts that you find interesting, or facts that you think would meet the requirements to answer the question. Write in your own words, talk normal meaning. Do not write in fancy language because you are the one who's going to be using these notes. And basically E, which is you have enough when you can write needed paragraphs for your paper. So if you have a paragraph that you need to write a note on, do not write another paragraph of notes. No, 3 bullet points is enough. And cite as soon as you decide to write, meaning that you need to cite the information that you take the notes from. So, in annotation, how do you annotate? All right, again, this is not set in stone and you can choose to do whatever works for you. All right, you can underline unfamiliar words, you can circle them, you can highlight them. This is your choice. Now, drawing arrows to show related ideas is usually useful. You can number for steps, lists, or details. And then you can jot questions and confusion in the margins if you do not understand a specific something. This exclamation point is something that basically is surprising to you or that you disagree with. The star is to label important ideas, and then this, no, not even, don't use that. Don't use lol, no. All right, so on page 25 in your book, if you turn to page 25, there's an exercise. I found if you don't have an idea or if you need to work on your note-taking and annotation skills, then simply do it. So that's simply it for note-taking and annotations. We'll be moving on to the next part of the unit. So writing. So writing a summary, writing a critique, and writing a synthesis. Again, as I mentioned in the very beginning, this is a very simplistic form of writing a summary, a critique, and a synthesis. It's only introducing you to the topic, so no need to worry there. So in writing a summary, there are different ways that you can write a summary, but in short, you read an article, and of course you make sure that you understand it. You note the major points in the original work. You write them in your own words, and then you make sure that you've covered everything important from the original work, right? So if you have a one-page story, if you have a one-page article, the summary would be about a paragraph, all right? 4 or 5 sentences, depends on how you summarize and your style. But a summary is in your own words, most importantly, and it's usually shorter than the original, meaning that you do not have to write up another page of summary for a one-page article, all right? Okay, so the noting, again, is approximately 1/4 of the length of the original. And one more thing you need to look at, and this is important, ladies and gentlemen. Never put any of your own ideas, opinions, or interpretations into the summary. A summary is you are simply summarizing, right? Giving a shortened form of what you have read. That's it. Nothing else. Do not include your own opinions or ideas. Fair enough? Okay. A critique. So writing a critique. Simply a critique is a careful analysis of an argument to determine what is said, how well the points are made, what assumptions underlie the argument, what issues are overlooked, and what implications are drawn from such observation. Response and evaluation of what you read. That's it. All right. So when you critique a work, all right, it's your personal response to it. If you critique a movie, right, you go to the cinema and you watch a movie and then you talk about it with your friends, like as soon as the movie's over. This is a critique, ladies and gentlemen. Why did you like the movie? Why did you like the actor? Why did you hate the movie? Why do you think you wasted 2 hours of your time watching it? All right? What is your argument? So you hated the movie. Why? What did you hate about it? Was the cinematography good? Was the lighting good? Was the acting okay? What was the plot? Right? It's the same with books, or it's the same with articles. You read a critique, Think about it. All right? Each has their own opinion, and it's your own personal response. But when you respond, you also have to include your evaluation. So there are useful questions to ask yourself. Over here. What is the nature of the piece? Who wrote it? Why? And what are his or her qualifications? What are its objectives? How well are these objectives achieved? What assumptions underlie the piece? Are they offensive? Obvious? How do the assumptions and biases affect the validity of the piece? Right? So this is all useful information to think about when you are reading an article. All right? Sometimes remember back to the weight loss pill articles, or this new kale miracle food that makes you lose weight, or Coca-Cola being used helpful to the human body. If you read a piece like this, how do you critique it? You look at back to the author, you look at who funded the work, you look at the nature of the piece, again, who wrote it, why, and what are the objectives? Is it to sell a specific drug? Is it to sell Coca-Cola? Right? And what assumptions underlie the piece? Meaning, does the writer think that the reader knows what Coca-Cola is? Did they define what Coca-Cola is? And is the piece offensive, or is it obvious? All right. So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. That's all you need to know. So it's a synthesis, writing a synthesis. Now, for those that have never heard of a synthesis before, that's okay. It's simply another type of writing, like a critique or like a summary. But instead, it puts together two ideas, two or more sources into one piece of writing. But you have to keep in mind that when you are writing a synthesis, it is not only a summary. And I repeat, it is not only a summary, ladies and gentlemen. It is about finding relation between the different sources and offering your opinion. So for example, you have 3 sources, right? I give you 3 articles and I tell you write a synthesis using these 3 articles. What you have to do is you have to look at these 3 articles individually, summarize them, and then try to find a relation between the two. Maybe they are opposing views of a single topic. Maybe they are facts of one specific product. Try to find a relation. But once you find a relation, do not forget to offer your opinion. All right, and this is a must. Simply summarizing is not important, is not enough. Simply finding a relation is not enough. You need to offer your own opinion on the work, or opinion, or perspective, or point of view. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, all right, turn to page 30 in your books. You will find the end of the unit, which is rounding up, where you have the new terms and concepts. Please know these words and concepts. All right, this is important, and I keep repeating it after every class. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this conducts the webinar. Again, if you have any questions or any information or that you need me to make clear, please do let me know. Just write me up on the NMS and I'll try to be helpful as possible. All right, thank you very much for listening. Bye-bye then.